the Feminist. If you ask him where he went to high school, he likes to boast that actually he went to an all-girls school. Which is sort of true. He was one of 5 males at a progressive private school that had gone co-ed just before he'd enrolled. People always replied, "Ooh la la, lucky guy. You must have had your pick." Which irritates him because it implies that women would only date him if they had only few other options, and also because he hadn't dated anyone in high school. In junior year, a freshman girl had a crush on him, but he wasn't attracted to her curvaceous body type, so he felt justified in rejecting her, as he'd himself been rejected many times. Still, the school ingrained in him, if not feminist values per se, the value of feminist values. It had been cool, or at least normal, to identify as asexual, and though he didn't, he figured it was a better label than virgin. His friends, mostly female, told him he was refreshingly attentive and trustworthy for a boy. Meanwhile, he was grateful to learn that female is best used as an adjective, that sexism harms men too, though obviously nowhere near the extent it harms women, and that certain men pretend to be feminists just to get laid. When he graduated, he felt slightly sheepish about never having even kissed anyone. Everyone knew, though, that real dating started in college, where nobody would be aware of his track record. But in college, he encountered the alien school system of codes and manners that governed flirting, conveyed in a subtextual cue no more perceptible to him than ultraviolet radiation. Learning in high school, about body positivity and gender norms and the cultural construction of beauty had led him to believe that adults weren't obsessed with looks. This turns out to be untrue, even among his new female friends who complain about how shallow men are. Now that he's self-conscious, he realizes he can't compete along conventional standards of height, weight, grip strength, whatever. How can he hope to attract anyone with his narrow shoulders? The woman he tries to date offer him friendship instead, so once again, most of his friends are women. This is fine. It's their prerogative. And anyway, lots of relationships begin platonically, especially for guys with narrow shoulders. But soon a pattern emerges. The first time as he is leaving his friend's dorm room, he surprises himself by saying, "Hey, this might be super random." And she can totally say no, but he's attracted to her. So did she want to go on a date sometime? In a casual and normal voice. And she says, "Oh," and filibusters. She had no idea he felt that way. And she doesn't want to risk spoiling a good thing that they have by making it a thing. She thinks it'll be best if they just say, and she rushes to assure her that, no, it's valid. No, totally valid. He knows friendship isn't a downgrade. Sorry for being weird. Ugh. Right? She replies. Dating's so overrated and meaningless in college anyway. And she knows that he knows he'll find someone who deserves him because he's great. Really great. So thoughtful. So smart. Not like these SAE sideways hat-wearing dude bros, of course. He must already know that she really appreciates it. Then he thanks her for being so honest, because it proves that she respects him. And don't worry about him. He gets it. He does get it. It sort of kills him, but he knows his rejecter was only trying to spare his feelings, since men often react badly to quote-unquote hard rejection. So he validates her condolences and communicates them back until she's convinced he'll be fine. Grr, friend-zoned again, he says, shaking his fist towards the ceiling. And they laugh together and hug, and he walks back to his dorm at sunrise. He gets into bed and sighs. While he's confident he handled everything respectfully, the girl's praise only reminds him that none of his ostensibly good qualities are attractive enough to even warrant him a chance, which makes them seem worthless. He also suspects her flattery was exaggerated and a bit patronizing. Like if she didn't think friendship was a downgrade, she wouldn't have said she just wanted to stay friends. By persuading him to reject himself, was she simply offloading her guilt? He stews at the one-sided familiarity of the situation. Once again, he's got to be the one who accepts, forgives, tolerates. pretends not to be wounded, pretends he has stopped hoping. All this sapping emotional labor to preserve his dignity and assuage her guilt. And also because he doesn't want to spoil his chances of dating her in the future, since it's her prerogative, after all, to change her mind. Still, he respects her decision. He gets out of bed feeling compelled to check in and let her know where he stands. So he composes this long post-mortem email, reconstructing everything that happened from the beginning, assuring her that he knew nobody was to blame for a lack of attraction, and that if it isn't clear, yes, he is interested in her. But he's not one of those fake feminist guys who snubs any woman he can't fuck. So sorry if this is completely graceless and exhausting. By no means is he making his embarrassment her problem. He just wants to get everything out in the open. He hit send. An hour later, he sends a second email. Just out of curiosity, could she say a little bit about why she rejected him? It'd be really helpful for him. Is it because he's narrow-shouldered? Is that a deal breaker for her? Because he can't help that, as she knows. Or is it a specific thing he did or said? Because if so, they could discuss that. Clear up any miscommunication. Anyway, he'll be fine. Hopes everything's cool. And if she ever changes her mind, well, he'll be around. Considering his tremendous effort to be vulnerable, it seems unfair, rude even, when a day passes with no replies. Fearing that he might not receive one at all, he writes a third email clarifying that she's by no means obliged to reply, though if she wants to, he'd love hearing her thoughts. He's somewhat annoyed when she again doesn't reply, though he's glad to have given her that option. At least, nothing's been left unsaid. This exact scenario happens 4 or 5 more times with different women. Later, when he relates these incidents lightheartedly to his other female friends, they assure him that he's interesting, smart, thoughtful, good-looking, though they never seem to say hot. They say nothing's wrong with him. It's so bizarre that you're single, they say, trying to mollify him with optimism, as if their romantic experience has made them experts in his lack of it. But they have no experience of having no experience. He figures that even bad relationships are better than none, since they prepare you for future relationships, and heartbreak is romantic and dignified, whereas rejection only makes you a loser. Short of abuse, their worst case would be to be in his position. Anyway, he doesn't want pity. He wants not to need it. All of his female friends have rejected him before, though not always explicitly. More often, when he's out with them in public, someone will mistake him for a boyfriend, which gives him a sky-blue moment of joy before his female friend laughs, blows a raspberry, and says, "Oh, my God, no, that would be like incest." But he takes these insults nobly, and later consoles himself by masturbating to the idea of having incestuous sex with them. Sometimes he drops hints to his friends to set him up with their friends, but for some reason they never follow through. He decides there must be another way to stand out and be attractive. He cultivates academic achievement in his gender studies major, surmising that status and intellect will enhance his appeal. But just like in high school, he finds himself overlooked. Even with the paucity of men in his major, outside of it, the rich, handsome, and broad-shouldered guys still get all the attention. Then again, so do the terrible and ugly ones. His female friends keep dating these guys with cratered skin, awkward manners, poor hygiene, talentless schlubs identified by their hobbies and tastes, philandering worms, controlling, abusive dirtbags. Even his gay first-year roommate had a girlfriend back in high school before he came out. And yeah, maybe these guys all deserved love, but surely no more than him. At a house party, one friend talks about going home with a guy that night before who said all he wanted was to sleep beside her. Then around 1 a.m., she awoke to him grunting as he ejaculated on her leg. When she cussed him out, he claimed he was overcome with raw animal passion, quote-unquote, and quote-unquote couldn't help it. And she still let him stay, despite this. "Whatever, we'll probably be married in 3 years, she says, rolling her eyes. He's about to insist she shouldn't devalue herself by deploying sarcasm to suppress trauma, that she's been violated and shouldn't be out tonight, and is astounded when everyone, including her, starts laughing. He joins in, figuring that this is some cathartic part of the healing process, even though it sounds to him like a clear case of sexual assault. Even more confusing, he'd asked her out once before, so a literal rapist is more appealing than him? He keeps silent as another friend says, "Men are dog shit." And sure, fair. He understands they mean the patriarchy and not him specifically. But why'd she say that with him standing right there? Unless she didn't count him as a man to them? Unless he didn't count as a man to them? Not wanting to seem fragile or impugn their dignity, their judgment, or center the conversation on himself, he says, yeah, we're total dog shit. Files this incident away in a thickening dossier of unfairness, a piece of insurance he will be able to use as evidence of their own imperfect principles if they ever try to call him out in the future. Privately, too, he reasons that if they're going to keep dating assholes, what do they expect? Later, gut-checking himself to make sure his concern for his traumatized friends is legitimate, he texts her, "Hey, I'm around if you need to talk about whatever happened, or even just watch trashy TV, whenever, wherever." She doesn't reply. Dragging around his virginity like a body bag into his mid-20s, he watches a certain amount of domination-oriented porn, probably due to internalized sexism, though. He's read that porn is a safe, healthy venue to explore kink, that sexuality is neither a choice nor shameful, especially if the studios follow good labor and aftercare practices. His female friends agree. He does not mention that he seeks out actresses that resemble them, which he deems victimless and acceptable as long as he consumes it critically, demarcating fantasy from reality and maintaining his sensitivity for the performers. He's more worried about physical desensitization. He doesn't use lubrication, since his roommates would overhear it. He comes to prefer the intensity of this quote-unquote dry method, but feels the friction is somehow eroding his psyche and possibly dulling the nerves in his penis. Resolving to wean himself by using a condom while masturbating, he wonders in what other ways touch, or the lack of it, has warped him. He's read about that study of baby monkeys who were denied soft physical contact and grew up disturbed and sickly. It's hard to believe chastity was ever associated with purity when it feels like putrescence. His blood browning, saliva clouding with pus, each passing day rendering him more leprously foul. What about those venerable virgins like Newton, Dickinson, and Kant? Kant. No, their virginity was a matter of will. They believed that God loved them for it. At lunch one day, two of his male co-workers offered unsolicited dating advice, relishing the chance to showboat their sexual proficiencies. He's too honest and available, not aggressive enough. Friend zone shit, they say unironically. Don't be a fucking pussy is all. You gotta challenge them. Be a puzzle for them to work out. That's how girls' brains work. It's evolution. They offer grotesquely specific advice about eye contact and hair touching. Learn palmistry, they say. Bitches love getting their palms read. Then they ask him how he makes a move. He says that he asks first. Wait, you asked them if you can kiss them? My man, one says, laughing and slapping his back. You don't ask. With the jagged touchiness, he calls them out, insisting that consent is non-negotiable and that even if they're joking, or especially if they're joking, it's textbook rape culture. Well, what makes you think you can speak for all women, one says, smirking. You're a guy too. Why do you know better than us what women prefer, especially considering they're dating us? He's not speaking for all women, he says. Unsure of how he'll answer, but certain he has something to say. He's speaking as a man against men who are speaking against women. Go ahead then, his coworker laughs. Ask your female friends what they think. He composes a long email reporting them both to HR, and later that night, bristling, he calls the QPOC agender friend from his college co-op, whom he's always gotten along with, in part because he's never been attracted to them. He repeats what his coworkers said, performing their dialogue with a dumb guy voice. His friend says, "Well, that's gross," and makes him swear never to become a mind-gamey asshole, going on to say that the so-called friend zone is a sexist canard that lets losers, like who he wonders, blame their own unattractiveness on women. He agrees, then asks if it isn't true that some guys simply lack charisma or attractiveness and are thus more prone to getting befriended. Maybe, they say. He asks his friend if mind games work. Sure, sometimes, they say. That's why they're so common, but they never lead to anything good. Never? He asks. Okay, yeah, shit's complicated. Some people are old-fashioned or mistake abuse for affection. Doesn't mean we should encourage it. He asks if it's wrong to ask permission to kiss someone. It depends more on how you ask. He asks if they personally would prefer it. No, but not all women. I'm not even a woman. He asks if they believe most women would prefer it. Who knows? Every woman's different, and things are always changing. Listen, I'm not sure what you're trying to get out of me here. Again, I'm not a woman. Sure, he's aware of that, he replies. But it's important to him, especially as a cisgender, heterosexual white man, to avoid placing the burden of educating him about women's experiences on a woman, which is why it's so great to have friends of other genders. His friend says, yeah, I guess. He thanks them for taking his call so late at night. In spite of his queer person of color's friends' ambiguous advice, he decides that more experience will improve his odds. So he resorts to online dating, cropping out his narrow shoulders from his photos and carefully wording his bio. He, him, his, or whatever pronouns you are most comfortable with. Unshakably serious about consent, abortion's #1 fan, loves books, Thai food, a glass of Vino Verde on my balcony, endless conversation. Did I mention books? I can usually be found haunting the bookstores and bake shops of our fair burg when I'm not dismantling the imperialist, male supremacist, hetero patriarchy. But I'd also be fine saying to hell with it and staying at home for an Agnes Varda marathon sesh, followed by discussion and perhaps a wee snogfest. Winky face. I always do my own cooking. Thanks, Mom. And I'll make a killer brunch for you. Trans women are women, duh. All races, ethnicities, and body types, but not all H's are welcome. Mutual GGG. He suspects some of it risks sounding try-hard, but he prefers sincerity and clarity over fake mystique. And what reasonable woman wouldn't be attracted to a vocal ally? He sends thoughtful, grammatical messages, like a link to a Psychology Today article about limerence, followed by a fascinating topic. I'm a total sucker for the intersections of psychology and romance. Would love to talk it over at the public venue of your choosing. The few dates this brings only yield more rejection. 3 postponed indefinitely, then ghost. 3 more are no-shows. 1 leaves while he's in the bathroom. Dating online, he realizes one has to choose between fraudulence or the sort of honesty that can't compete with fraudulence. But then he thinks, isn't the idea that women don't know what's best for them sexist, informed by his own petty resentment? Troubled by this paradox and unable to sleep, he texts his queer person of color, QPOC friend, and asks them to be honest. Has he actually been a creep this whole time? Is he a dude bro in some way? And has he therefore deserved to be single for the last 30 years? His friend texts back, okay, but can you really count the first 16 years? Then adds that he should feel weird about his concerns, but he hasn't done anything, and a real creep probably wouldn't agonize so much over whether he was a creep. Good night. Then he replies, but if agonizing about being a creep is what proves he's not a creep, and he stops worrying about being a creep, wouldn't that make him a creep? His QPOC friend doesn't respond. He's still unnerved, though relieved someone who was once female identified has given him a pass. He withdraws into work, whereas before he only went out in hopes of meeting someone. Now he stays in so he won't have to see anyone. The allopreening couples, the untouchable women, the broad-shouldered men, even a passing whiff of aloe lotion on a woman's skin makes him feel structurally unsound and shivering in his linings. When he does go out in public, he avoids looking at any woman's face, convincing himself it's respectfully uncreepy, but aware in the gloomy sub-basement of his mind that the real reason is because if she is beautiful, then the image of her face and the question of how he might have introduced himself and the beautiful life they might have lived together will torment him for days. At age 31, he has sex. One day on social media, he happens across the girl, the woman he rejected in high school. She's cleaned up, her body type is no longer curvaceous, and he likes how in all her photos she wears a skirt and leggings, a thin dark cardigan over her blouse, a personal uniform suggesting fidelity to figured-out principles, but dislikes how her dyed red hair pinches off in a tiny bun that reminds him of all the meaty tail nubs on docked pit bulls. Though that's fixable. Seeing that they live in the same city, he messages her and suggests they meet. She shows up 40 minutes late, which he forgivingly tolerates, knowing that women's time is taxed by the pressures of female grooming. For about 15 minutes, they catch up and chit-chat. It's small, even if promisingly pleasant. He insists on paying for drinks, joking that it's not chivalry, it's reparations for sexism and all. He soon regrets it, however, because on her third whiskey ginger and his first, she starts rambling about some guy who dumped her ages ago, then jokes about her eating disorder. Every few minutes, her face scrunches like she's about to cry, then reverts weirdly to normal. Her blouse untucks, and when a guy playing pool nearby positions his cue close to her face, she slaps it to the floor. Lonely as he is, does he deserve someone unstable? He'll have to reject her again, like in high school. What will he say? That he doesn't want to waste her time? That he thinks she's super great, but he doesn't feel a spark? Having seldom been in the position to reject anyone else, he feels terrible for having to inflict on her the same pain he's always felt himself. Hours later, he still has not figured out a compassionate enough way to phrase it. And at this point, as they're leaving the bar, he decides he might as well kiss her goodnight for the sake of casual experience and then let her down nicely over text message. He asks if he can kiss her. She says no. He asks why not. What do you mean by why not? She says. Because I don't want to. Who the fuck asks why not? Fucking asshole. He wonders if she is testing him. He asks if she is testing him. This time she gives him a 2-arm shove, sending him to the ground instead of yelling. She smiles like a sock puppet and says, "Oh my God, are you wearing shoulder pads?" Getting up, he briefly considers shoving her back, though not as hard as she shoved him, since that would not be fair. But before he can do anything, she is doubled over and clutching her calves in laughter. And when she recovers, she says, with unbelievable nonchalance, "Okay, wait, I'm sorry, dude. I didn't mean to push you that hard. Come on, is this happening or what?" The sex disappoints. Her moans and arches feel contrived and uncomfortable, dirty. And when he tries to maintain eye contact in missionary position to establish a bond, she closes her eyes. Something, maybe his dulled penis nerves, keeps deferring his orgasm until she gets impatient and pushes him away. He acquiesces, not having finished, his embarrassing frustration mitigated only by the unburdening of his virginity and the prospect of telling everyone about it. To reassure her that his sexual awkwardness was not her fault, he tells her she's beautiful. She waits nearly 10 seconds and replies, "You have an interesting mind." After this incident, he develops thoughts of self-harm, which are sharpened by his awareness that rejection, loneliness, and sexual frustration are nothing compared to the institutional and historic oppression that women face. His sadness, he knows, is a symptom of entitlement. So he is not even entitled to his sadness. As a 30-something, he feels too young to give up, but too old to adapt. His self-reliance is ossified into a lifestyle of craved, defended solitude. He can't imagine having to share a bed every night, not being able to read or wake up or leave parties whenever he wants. No, this is not mere solitude. Solitude is fine. Inescapable aloneness is not. Taking trips and seeing movies and attending events all seem pointless without anyone to experience them with. So it feels like his life cannot progress or even truly begin until he has found someone who will return his love. And as he's aged, has his intimacy with his female friends deepened? Did these friends, who always maintained that romantic love was overrated, who said friendships were what mattered in the end, provided him any alternative to romantic love? No. After all these years of talking them through each and every breakup, engendered work dispute, sending them thoughtful gifts and memes, loaning them money for rental deposits, taking their dating app photos, reassuring them of their beauty when they hated how the photos came out, and supporting them when they were fighting with their boyfriends. After all that, these female friends of his have all moved on to cohabit, marry, and breed. Even if they are miserable, at least they're living real lives, with partners who prioritize them above all others. Lately, he sees them once a month tops, even though he's known them far longer than their partners have. They've all stopped inviting him to dinner parties because it was a couples thing and you would have hated it, which, while true, was still exclusionary, backed by the hegemonic and regressive institution of monogamy. He realizes that these female friends have at last completed their long-term rejections of him, that without ever having had a girlfriend, his life is strewn with exes, friends without benefits. His life is strewn with exes and friends without benefits, okay. But he can't complain about his friends to his friends. His male coworkers would roast him or pretend to sympathize, yet secretly think he's a pussy. And his female friends might think that he's passive-aggressively implicating them, and also think that he's the pussy. Since any rejection now paralyzes him with rage for weeks, he stops dating. He resents his married friends, his contently single friends, his unhappily single friends who nonetheless have casual sex, his parents when they gently question his sexuality. He also resents the grotesque fixations that have cropped up recently, like if he's only ever used condoms and the epidermis of his penis has never made contact with the mucous membrane of a vagina, if he's never ejaculated into a birth canal or a cervix, does that technically mean that he's still a virgin? Have his possibly dulled penis nerves entrained a vicious cycle of death grip syndrome, adding yet another obstacle to love? Was masturbation lowering his testosterone levels, contributing to his narrow shoulders? And does that give women the impression that he has a small penis, which he statistically doesn't? All he's doing is sharing some of these valid gripes at a picnic one afternoon when his QPOC agent or friend asks him, why doesn't he call that girl from high school who took his virginity? He replies just because he wants to be in a relationship doesn't mean he has to settle for a sociopath. See, now you're moving the goalpost like always, his QPOC friend replies. It's easy to feel sorry for yourself when you keep redefining rejection. You refuse pity but crave it so much that you won't admit how strongly you invite it. He says they're being facile, though he knows their point is rather nuanced and specific, and he hasn't even considered it before. But he can't walk it back now. I'm facile, his friend says. Nah, I'm tired, that's what it is, I'm tired, they say from behind their sunglasses, waving their mimosa. I know you identify as a reject, and I know that's like your brand and all, like it's some unprecedented form of suffering that gives you secret saintly wisdom. All this nonstop high-frequency whining, that's what's facile. He presses his lips shut while his brain feels like a swirling case of lottery balls, as his friend's pausing to hit a spliff continues. I mean, what the fuck do you want? Somehow you got a shit deal. Nobody knows why. Maybe you never really grappled with this because you thought you were exempt, but you refuse to change and are shocked when nothing changes. You keep doing all these unsolicited favors, putting in all this effort, and because the only forms of repayment you'll accept are love and sex, you always feel cheated. It's not like you enjoy this, but you do enjoy pushing other people's faces in it. That's your main consolation. Wild how you're always right and nobody ever had it worse. Nobody's as pure and as wronged as you. Yo, everyone, check out the woman respecter. The last principled man right here. And that's why you need it. Because you get to convince yourself you're being rejected for your virtue, not because you're a bummer. You've turned your loneliness into this, fetish necklace of martyrdom. And all of us, they glance around at the other picnickers, have to sit here and rubber stamp your feminism. If we don't indulge your wallowing, we're being callous and complicit with some diabolical global conspiracy that's keeping you from getting pussy. But if we do, then we're disingenuous because none of us will fuck you ourselves, right? Am I right, ladies? Hands up, who agrees? 3 women's hands shoot up, followed by, more slowly, by the rest. His queer people of color friend gestures at them like, behold. I don't know what to say, man, except motherfucking kishits. I, for one, am bored of your scab collection. I'm sorry your dick is sad and whatever. Suck it up, you bitter little boy, and move on. Fantastic. That's fucking great. The clearest example yet of how even his friends dismiss him with strawman arguments out of sheer intellectual laziness, because he refuses the easy consolation of playing along with the oppressive patriarchal paradigm. They'd rather call him self-sabotaging instead of thinking critically for 1 second about the bullshit social biases narrow-shouldered men suffer under, which originate in the same toxic masculinity they supposedly abhor. He doesn't have the luxury of having fun, fresh relationship drama like theirs, so they get bored of him. Even though listening to his problems is far easier than living through them. He listens to their problems all the time. Vitrified with outrage, he replies to his queer people of color friend that they're minimizing his problems just because having narrow shoulders isn't on the official registry of politicized traumas. They're saying he can't express his feelings because worse things happen? By that logic, he could say that their stupid anxieties about dating bi women aren't important because they're not being rounded up and thrown off of rooftops like queer people in, for example, Syria are. But he wouldn't say that to his queer person of color friend. He would listen. Wow. You really don't want to press this, his friend warns, removing her sunglasses. And BT dubs, I'm not your queer person of color friend. Are you fucking kidding me? He shouts, unsure if his exasperation is mock or real. You took it there. You made it about identity. All I'm doing is reflecting literally the exact same sentiment as you. And so don't evade the point. And don't get the idea that framing it as a call-out puts you in the right. And I brought those mimosas, by the way. He grabs at his friend's drink. Everyone scrambles. His queer people of color friend's friend, a much larger, broad-shouldered man, gets up and tells him, okay, my guy, time to move along. It defies all reason that he's getting ejected from a picnic for the sin of airing opinions in good faith by this alpha dickhead flaunting his swollen deltoids. This was the male ally they preferred, not the intellectuals who challenged them as equals in an open dialogue, but this muscle-confused Sasquatch. They're all happy to hide behind patriarchy when it suits them. He snatches up his read more women tote bag and leaves. On his way home, with jittering fingers, he pulls out his phone to block his drunk queer person of color friend on social media and sees they've posted, shake my head at men who squawk about their feminism, but really hang out with women for the gendered power advantage. Fuck out of here. He sees that the post already has over 100 likes and counting. One of the women who was at the picnic replied, oh my god, dead ass. And even that got 36 likes. The thought of 100 strangers reading this petty, unsubstantiated accusation and reflexively siding with a queer person of color without knowing anything about the context of what happened leads him to mass block everyone who failed to support him at the picnic. He counterposts. Shake my head at performing woke queer folks who pretend to care about equality but really just get off on humiliating strong male allies who are trying to help and consequently punishing and alienating them for fervently upholding the basic tenets of contemporary feminism. Fuck out of here. But deletes it because he can't figure out how to make it sound good, which is unfair because the point is valid. It would be pathetic now to keep seeing those friends. Maintaining friendships cost his female friends nothing, but it cost him a daily toll of endless triggering, which they'd never once acknowledged. They're fine with freeloading off his insight and generosity, but the moment he dares to question their opinions or have genuine feelings for them, it's like his attraction to some morsel of filth he's tried to trick them into swallowing. Yet free falling into his 30s, it's harder to make new friends. If he stays in, he feels anxious about not meeting people. If he goes out, he spends the whole night at whatever depressing bar, poetry reading, art opening, scanning the room for women, standing by themselves whom he never has the will to approach. Then he goes home alone, weary and dark-minded, to face the sight of his empty bed, which is even emptier after he gets in it, lying awake with pangs of loneliness that feel like getting stabbed through a very soft pillow. He lost his virginity so long ago, it feels like it's growing back. On one of those long nights, an ugly curtain lifts in his head. He's old enough to know that relationships don't guarantee happiness, that the source of his pain is a patriarchal fantasy, agonizing elaborated over decades about love and sex as the basis of fulfillment. But he still feels he cannot be happy until this pain stops. And it will not stop until he has an experience of love that will at least disillusion him. When he uses dating apps, he finds himself decreasingly attracted to women of a suitable age range, which at first concerns him, since he used to mock age gap relationships when he was younger. However, this concern is quickly shunted aside by indignation. Why should everyone else have the opportunity to date 20-somethings, and not him? Perhaps he thinks he could temporarily date a few younger women who would greatly benefit from his wealth and life experience, then eventually catch up and move on to age-appropriate women without regret. To attract these younger women, he goes keto, takes improv classes, and consolidates his reputation at work, though he'd long since lost his relish for it when he realized it didn't magically improve his dating odds. None of it does. Around this time, he starts to feel breathless, like he's wearing a compression garment around his lungs. His stomach is tense and swollen as a basketball, and he urinates frequently. His heart skitters and rushes. He has trouble swallowing. He can seldom achieve full erection. His customary dry method has lost its efficacy, and male masturbation toys prove ineffective. When he manages to ejaculate, it falls out of him like a touchless soap dispenser. So he's finally managed to sexually bore even himself. One day at work, while he's waiting for the microwave to finish heating up a cheese and mushroom tart, a quantity of urine dribbles out unbidden. His primary doctor refers him to a blood lab and a urologist who conducts an ultrasound and diagnoses him with a levator spasm. Probably stress-related, and researching its causes, he learns that loneliness can manifest psychosomatically as anxiety, even shorten your lifespan. He also reads in blog posts about chromosomal perpetuation, that children bear trace amounts of the DNA of all their mother's sex partners in their own DNA. So it is true, confirming suspicions he didn't even know he had, that sex partners matter biologically, that they leave a mark. These findings send him into action. He hits the gym, where he targets his deltoids with set after set of shrugs and lateral raises, and afterwards takes zinc sulfate, lysine, and arginine to increase seminal volume. Horny goat weed and pumpkin seed extract for libido, cabergoline to lessen the refractory period by lowering prolactin. He gets a prescription for depot testosterone and decaderobalin to manage hypogonadism and improve pelvic muscle tone. Then somatotropin, then trenbolone. The goal is to get his ejaculate to arc again. Then after 3 months, he sees few changes except for unaccountable surges of anger and longer post-masturbation cleanup. He begins regularly donating sperm to get them a non-zero chance of propagating, and also starts using a penis pump to the point of vascular damage, giving his penis the look of a dead manatee. If it's going to be numb and useless, it might as well be big. He knows he is sick and must find relief. He wants so badly to believe that his life isn't broken and can still bring satisfaction, and each second is the slow fizz of a cell death, telomeres shedding their base pairs 2 by 2 like an ignited fuse. He contemplates all the organisms in the natural world having sex constantly, effortlessly: stray dogs, mosquitoes, dandelions, yeast. At work, when he isn't thinking, "This is all I'm good for," he thinks, "I should kill myself." By then, he imagines his former female friends hearing of his death and not caring, or even laughing. To them, it wouldn't be tragic. They did not need him as much as he needed them, or at all. This maddening thought keeps him dismally alive. For a while, he tries paying for sex, hoping more experience will give him confidence. And while he is strongly pro-sex workers' rights, he still resents having to pay for something that someone somewhere ought to offer enthusiastically, for free, even while having sex. It comes freighted with so many expectations. Such intense anticipation of disappointment that he doesn't enjoy it. To finish, he silently imagines the woman is pregnant, and that his more potent semen is killing off the other man's embryo, displacing it with his own. He tips well. Sometime after turning 40, he makes a rare excursion from his apartment to visit his old favorite restaurant in a hip neighborhood he lived in a decade ago. The kind of upscale Italian bistro where they serve meatballs but not spaghetti. The foyer is crammed and it's 50-minute wait. This place never used to be this crowded. It had been a quiet place to read without feeling lonely. Now it is massed with couples and their offspring colonizing yet another space, basking in the triumphalism of love instead of confronting the real harm of their prejudice and superiority. And yes, the privileges they enjoy. He waits out on the muggy sidewalk until his name is called, and at the entrance, a fleet of strollers exits the restaurant through a narrow vestibule. He flattens against the plastic wall to let 2, 3, 4 strollers pass by. Then tries to enter the restaurant when a 5th woman approaches, pushing an enormous 3-wheeler with a BMX tires and a crusty-eyed newborn scrunched inside of it. He expects her to let him through, but instead she pushes the vestibule door open, and he feels and hears a crack, looks down at his leather sandals and sees his big toenail folded up at an astonishing angle. Ow, ow, ow. Rather than apologize, she trades an eye roll with her husband, who says, "Buddy, she can't get through if you don't move back." "Your convenience doesn't outweigh mine," he asserts to the father. "I have an equal right to be here. Plus, you damaged my foot." Instead of replying, the father pushes him by the shoulder out onto the sidewalk, again violating his bodily autonomy. Being civil and slow to anger, he says nothing, even as fury chain reacts down through his chest. The strollers recede to the end of the block, spanning the sidewalk's whole width, and now first limping, then sprinting, he catches up to them, and carelessly with his injured foot delivers a solid righteous side stomp to one of the stroller's chassis. The mother catches it before it tips over, and he serves another wild kick before shooting off through traffic across the street. Their shouts degrade into noise as he rounds the corner at a hobbled gallop, and he makes sure they hear him laugh. At home, legs trembling full of acid, grimacing, he peels off his bloody broken half toenail. The wound looks like a cut pomegranate, and he daubs it with alcohol, adding injury to injury, the pain piercing an opening inside him through which more tearful laughter escapes. He does feel somewhat guilty about what he did, yet he will not deny that it felt so good to ruin the evenings of the tyrannical assholes who loved to dehumanize innocent, single, narrow-shouldered men. Just a quick startle. No harm done. Actually, he's the one who was harmed. The only thing that bothers him is that he knows no one would condone what he did. More years pass, all alike. Something goes wrong in the bathroom. It was not a levitator spasm, after all. His doctor repeatedly assures him it is not a death sentence, but will require significant immediate changes to his lifestyle. The diagnosis clears his head like a window continuously opening. Finally, it's happened. They've killed him. He might as well be dead already. It is now certain he'll never get the one thing he's ever wanted. All because he internalized and accepted his unwantedness, languished too long in mealy-mouthed consolations, let himself be deceived into pitying those who would never pity him. Nothing can be done. He's never wanted to consider it, but with his hard-won lived experiences and the stark authority of his disprivilege, he can declare that women, in aggregate, are just wrong. That either they have failed feminism or feminism has failed them. Yes, it's complicated, and no woman in particular is to blame, but it's irrefutable that in general, a preponderance of women harbor the very source of double standards feminism sought to eliminate, and indulge a narcissistic victim complex by which they tolerate and even seek out aggro-misogyny in their romantic partners, while relying on men of conscience to handle the emotional scut work. In his newfound communities of narrow-shouldered men, he finds lived experience that aligned near unanimously with his. In the comments of blogs like The Empirical Agnate, The Rationally Rude, on forums like Seneca's Revenge and NSOM, Narrow Shoulders, Opened Minds, where he finds provocative opinions of undeniable salience, heroically uncowed by the anticipated backlash. At last, he's found men willing to declare unapologetically that narrow-shouldered feminist men are in truth the most oppressed subaltern group, excluded from both male privilege and female solidarity. The marginalization far worse than those based in race or gender, which were mere constructs as opposed to the material fact of narrow shoulders. He can trust these other men in a way he cannot trust anyone else, as they are the only ones on earth to take seriously his suffering and recognize that he isn't to blame for it. While he disagrees with many of their heterodox positions on job morphology and the age of consent, it is precisely the plurality of perspectives here that confirms the problem isn't his alone, it's systemic. Now that he is mostly confined to his bed, in one late-night tour of NSOM forums, which he moderates, he busy drawing red circles around the telltale shoulder pads, divots, and photos of male celebrities, when he notices one thread attracting dozens of replies. Some normie interloper has been trolling the NSOM boards with inflammatory posts. This has happened before, but never at such length. User Cold Shoulder 02. Unregistered. Location British Columbia. Age 23. 1 posts. 0 rep power. Just found this board, and I'm fucking obsessed, y'all. Not even just by the misogyny or the term paper talk y'all use to hide it. No, what's mesmerizing is, no lie, I'm one of you. I'm 23 and a virgin. Never had a girlfriend or even a date. Mostly solo queue, league, and work at Staples. I stumbled across this place because I have real NS. Hell, I'm built like a closed umbrella. And I always wondered if other guys felt insecure about this too. I work out sometimes, but I'm not crazy fit or anything, and I wish I were bigger. I think racist/sexist jokes are funny, but I feel bad about it. So probably likely you. And then I come here and wow. What happened, boys? I can't lie and say it isn't nice to find other NS guys, but this place is like staring into a cursed mirror where the longer you stare at it, the uglier you get. But it's so fascinating, you keep staring. Go ahead and call me a white knight/beta fag/lip or whatever weak shit you guys got called in gym class in 6th grade. I'd rather die a sane version than fall for this mess. I don't know, maybe it's more about what happened to me. Maybe it's because I figured out some meds that work for me, or because I have women in my life. Grew up around 4 sisters. In parentheses, I'm not saying I'm better than any of y'all. If I did, I'd be the same as y'all. So women either reject you or they don't act 100% the way you want them. Parentheses, the term for that is slavery, quote unquote. Bottom line is nobody's hurting or stealing anything from you. Y'all just hitched your psychosexual angst to your self-worth, and it's women's fault somehow. However unfair you think it is, you're making it worse. Hope y'all log off and find peace. He scrolls down through the ensuing dog pile, watches see Hawk 1488 posts memes of skinny guys labeled beta fag OP lifting 2-pound weights reads Michael J _fucks post femoid psyop piss off. By the end of the thread, his scalp is sodden and prickling. He feels that same flushed, hand-dog supervisibility, that cleansing shame he used to feel when being scolded by his QPOC friend or reading feminist literature that diagnosed his unseen advantages and corrected his gaffes. He remembers thinking, if a stranger can so accurately describe what I thought without even knowing me, they must be right, and I should listen to them. Now he wants to do likewise for this online stranger, whose familiar embracing conviction, uncompromised by experience, floods him with nostalgia. It's painful seeing this poor sap misled, as he himself was, like a sprinting dog about to hit the limit of its leash. The other users taunt the newcomer because it hurts less than admitting familiarity. Even if it's too late for himself, he feels a responsibility to awaken this younger man to reality. You may think you understand us, he posts, but I've been you for far longer than you have. I want to tell you about the reality of having lived 4 decades of silent, virtuous pain and never having your humanity and desirability recognized, he posts. It's not that I haven't done the intellectual labor to empathize with the broadest possible spectrum of female perspectives. I've read Sanger, and Frieden, and McKinnon, and Dworkin, and Firestone, and Faludi, and Winterson, and Butler, and Solanas, and Schulman, and Hooks and Greer. I understand them. They perhaps understand the viewpoint of patriarchy and its beneficiaries. But what have any of them read to understand us? Where in the archive do we even exist? My entire life I've been nothing but useful to women, selfless to the point that when I die, my entire being will evaporate without residue, with no one left to know what I've had to endure absolutely by myself. Think of all the times you've been ill, with no one to bring you soup, those nights you wake in the dark, full of fear, with no one to talk to. Every unshared bed, every expired condom, those couples you see everywhere laughing and going home and fucking in every conceivable position. It will never be you. It'll never be you. This is why you are wrong that they haven't stolen anything from us. They've stolen our lives, our happiness, our future, and the people in it. You will never have a woman, and you will never have a son. Women's fucked up preferences may have been ingrained there by the patriarchy, but women, as moral agents, fully equal to men, are no less responsible for them, and I will not infantilize them by claiming otherwise. Me, I have done more than my part. I have actively combated misogyny both in the world and within myself, tithed monthly to Planned Parenthood, marched and canvassed and fundraised and posted for women's rights. I'm commitment-friendly, prosperous, successful, not ugly. In fact, a solid 8 from the neck up, and nipples down, 6-inch penis from base to shaft, high sperm count and seminal motility, plus 7-degree canthal tilt and 14.6-inch biacromial breadth, veritably a straight flush of stable pair bonding qualities, and I have never once catcalled, gaslit, interrupted, or mansplained, taking every single rejection in stride without any social support, no shared costs, inside jokes, pet names, intimate confessions, indeed, any fond, romantic memories whatsoever, none of the bliss of puppy love, unspoiled by bitterness. The naive love that knows no betrayal, nor trusting companionship that weathers hate and temptation. Nobody waking up nestled in your elbow, no one to try new restaurants or take selfies or travel with, to say nothing of the conveniences, stability, and tax breaks enjoyed by the conjugal, on top of enduring the only real stigma that exists anymore. The only one that makes you feel less dignified for being honest about it, bachelorhood, he posts. I've never complained, objected, or harassed anyone all these years, no matter how cruel or senseless their rejection. If anything, I enabled their rejections, and even took it as my duty, which is all the more insidious, actually, that they convinced us to normalize and accept this, become complicit in our own oppression by pretending it's not happening or it doesn't matter, Or even if it is happening and does matter, you deserve it. That's right, they are gaslighting you. All to absolve themselves of guilt at the meager cost of our lives. We are made to eternally repent for the sins of the worst men, while those very same men reap the benefits of our care and counsel. And we are not even humored to speak on the matter. For they have built a cunning trap, a rhetorical kill switch where if you try to speak up for them, they say, stay in your lane. And if you say nothing, they say, silence is violence. Indicted from birth, lashed forever to the rack of apology, never forgiven, much less rewarded, regardless of action or intent. Do you see how they have made our existence impossible? This after all we've sacrificed for them. I would have died for them if they'd asked. I would have thrown my bleeding body on the barricades of the patriarchy, and they would have let me do it, indifferently accepting my death as their due, with not a punctum of guilt as they go off to bed and wed my murderers. That is the long con, their big lie. By now, my bachelorhood and yours cannot be ascribed to circumstance or bad luck, only injustice. We must reject it. Like my many, many female friends themselves always used to say, nothing's wrong with me. Any woman would be lucky to have me. I've only asked for the same modest redundancy that everyone else, including chauvinists, liars, addicts, narcissists, abusers, rapists, and low IQ men enjoy everywhere. I'd be the last to demand any special treatment for my actual unselfish, principled feminism, and to be sure, no specific woman is required to be attracted to us. But the fact that not one has been, out of billions, is proof of a categorical failure, a mass abrogation of the social contract by the legions of treacherous, evasive, giggling yeast buckets, he posts. I have always been there for women, when they have ever been there for me, or us rather. How, after decades of relentless refusal, can they ever repair this silent androcide, the calamity of our aborted futures? He received no reply. The stranger probably didn't even see his post. Examining what he'd written, scouring it with an unsparing eye towards logic and tone, he finds no error. He closes his laptop, surveys his dim room, humidifier, prescriptions, bottles, weights he can no longer lift, bedside wastebasket full of tissues watered with phlegm and Orcom. With his mouth in a grim hyphen, he inspects his penis, which is not only flaccid and cadaverously livid from overpumping, but has developed some sort of irritating sun rash that isn't sun rash, ever since he resorted to masturbating with a textured plumber's glove in order to feel anything at all. This can't happen again. All this not happening. The nothing that is made of words, the reading and processing and discussing and journaling and posting with which he'd attempted to understand the hundreds of women's voices he'd then gone on to uplift and amplify, only to hear that those voices were mocking him. All the listening, wasted effort, constituting a wasted life. Words by themselves have no substance, he realizes. They are only ever meant to underscore acts. Being correct has been its own reward and no reward at all. Now, with whatever miserable span of life remains to him, he must commit himself to action. Pull out the serrated knife of virtue that's been stuck in his chest for so long, he thought it was a part of him. Before he dies, he must stop nothing from happening. Weeks later, after some false starts, he is standing in the vestibule of his former favorite restaurant when a woman enters behind him, a short, young 20-something in a yellow smock, with little pin-tucked ruffles, her collarbones lightly pied by sunburn. He stands aside to hold the door for her, and she thanks him. In spite of his resolve, he smiles back and nods courteously at this small, final vindication before pulling on his ski mask, shrugging the backpack from his narrow shoulders and following her in.